Shalom, shalom to everyone watching. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel. As we continue our study to be a Jew, we are now in chapter 16 in the book, and we're going to be looking at the birth, or birth. In the life of every individual and every family, there are special occasions that cause for the celebration, as well as the occasion that calls forth for grief and mourning. Every people from time immemorial and every religious faith have seen fit to mark these occasions by special ceremonies and special observance. Judaism, too, has developed rites and ceremonies, rules and procedures for these occasions of life. While there are relatively few Torah laws that bear directly on the occasions and guidelines set down by the rabbis for their observance, and derived from the whole framework of spiritual values inherent to the Jewish faith, these examples shown by the patriarchs, the attitudes derived from numerous biblical passages, including the prophets and the writings, and the influence of the Jewish mystical sources, have all contributed to the halakhic framework that is applied to and that governs birth, puberty, marriage, and death. These are replete with customs that have been developed and emerged among Jews during centuries. It is precisely these areas which emerged among Jews during the century. It is precisely these areas that we are going to be able to highlight. As long as these local customs do not violate basic Jewish values or contradict Jewish law, they add to a variety of color of the local Jewish life. The section dealing with these occasions have been deliberately kept to a minimum in this series because we ought to limit ourselves to those rules that are halakhically binding upon all Jews, omitting the customs that may differ from one community to another and from one country to another. A Jew whose identification with Judaism is only in his adherence to these rites has assured himself only of the Jewish legal status, while there is most important, neither the nobility of Jewish belief nor the entire Jewish way of life is thereby reflected. Indeed, for one to whom the Jewish rites of passage constitutes the sum total of his religious identification, the Jewish religion is spiritually non-existent. Those who bring a child into the world must recognize the basic obligation they have towards providing the infant the loving care it craves and the physical attention it needs. And they must recognize the obligation that they have for providing moral guidance to the child that the child should have. There is no more important role in life than raising a child to be a responsible adult or adulthood. At birth, man is pure, free of all sins. The daily morning prayer taken from the Talmud, as we read in Berachot 60b, says, and it says it very succinctly, "O my God, the soul which you gave me is pure. You created it, and you fashioned it, and you breathed it in me. Blessed shall you be in your coming in," as we read in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 6, and it's interpreted as meaning also in your coming into this world. Baba Metzia 107a. It is only in the course of life that the acts contrary to God will accumulate, weighing down the soul. The course set for a child by its parents during his first days and early years is worth the most serious reflection and attention. Obviously, it all starts by the naming of the children. A male child is named during the ceremony of the covenant of circumcision, Berit Milah. A female child is named in the synagogue the week following her birth, when the father is called up to the Torah and prayer, and a Mishaberach is made for the health of the mother and the newborn infant. The full Hebrew name as used for all religious purpose and Hebrew legal document is name Ben, son of, the father's name, or name Bat, the daughter of the father's name. If the father is of priestly or Levitical descent, the title HaKohen or HaLevi is appended to the name. Aside from those classification or identified as descendants of the tribe of Levi and Cohen, class. All other Jews are classified simply as Israel or Am Israel. There are no religious or halakhic guidelines pertaining to the name of the Jewish children. Although in the United States, the rabbis are probably asked more questions about what is and is not permissible in this area than in any other single area of ritual, moral, or ethical conduct. In exile or the diaspora, where children are generally given Gentile names in civil birth records, the giving of an additional Jewish or Hebrew name, or Yiddish name, or Ladino name provides an important identification with the Jewish people and the Hebrew faith. It is this Hebrew or Ladino or Yiddish name that is given at the Brit or in the synagogue, or as in the case may be, which thereafter is used for all religious purpose, religious documents and prayers. It is by this name that a person is called up by the Torah, and that one uses in offering prayer for health and in drawing up wedding contracts, etc. If the Hebrew name given at birth is never referred to by the family and is never used in a synagogue, it obviously loses all significance, and so-called naming in retrospect is futile and meaningless exercise. In this instance, the real name of the person, even religious document, is the name by which he is actually called, be it in Anglo-Saxon and Spanish and French or German name. There is a widespread custom among Jews, particularly of Ashkenazic background, to name a child after a closely deceased relative whose memory they wish to honor and perpetuate. In Spanish countries, it's usually they name a child after a living relative, not one who has passed away. Although there is no religious obligation to do so, most seem anxious to follow this time-honored custom. It is also noble and worthy custom. Both young parents should not deceive themselves. The custom loses all of its meaning, and no memory is really honored if the name of that child is never used. It's forgotten by all, and the child is actually called by another name. Similarly, the custom has little significance if only the relationship between the child's name and the name of deceased or the living is a common first letter. The formal naming of the child is not a mystical rite through which the child is introduced into Judaism. In other words, giving a Jewish name does not, by itself, provide status as a Jew if other prerequisites of Jewishness are absent. And there are many Gentiles whose names are thoroughly Hebraic or biblical, and yet they're not Jewish. On the other hand, the absence of a formal naming, either the Brit or at the synagogue, or the absence of a distinctively Hebraic name, does not distract from one's Jewish status. If all of the requisites are present, these are on occasion in Jewish history when the formal naming of the child was given as a distinctively non-Jewish or non-Hebraic name. For example, we have Alexander, taken from Alexander the Great, and one such example of a name that has come down in Jewish family as a Jewish name. No doubt, before the rise of Nazi and the Yachshamo German leader Adolf Hitler, many Jewish people were named Adolf as a first name. No longer after World War II. The revival of Hebrew language and culture and the reestablishment of the State of Israel and the desire to identify as Jews on the part of the diaspora Jews should encourage young parents to use the biblical and Hebraic names, both classical and contemporary, not only for formal naming and religious purpose, but also for the legal name of the child to be recorded in civil birth records in the name by which he or she is really to be known to all. Now, you as a convert, you have the opportunity to be able to pick your own name that you will be called once you complete your conversion. So you need to consider what personality best reflect your soul. So when you pick that name, you will be called to the Torah utilizing that name. So think about it as you learn this portion about the birth of a child and the naming of the child. We're going to look at another video in our next video the bris, the covenant of circumcision. Why it's so important? Because here is where we establish that covenant between you and God, the covenant of Avraham Avinu, which he established in Genesis chapter 17, verse 10 through 14. But we'll take a look at that in our next video. So stay tuned and continue learning so you can become a Jew.